Hello, YouTubers. This is Gold Standard 0924 coming at you with a Wrestling Reimagining series for you guys today. We're going to pick up where we left off with the seventh installment of our WCW 1998 fantasy booking as we book the annual July pay-per-view Bash at the Beach. Basically, this pay-per-view actually drew a really good buy rate. A lot of it had to do with the involvement between two NBA players with Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone. These two NBA players were big rivals in basketball at the time, and Karl Malone represented the Utah Jazz, and Dennis Rodman represented the Chicago Bulls. And it was a big rivalry that had been going on for a couple years, especially during the height of the Chicago Bulls' popularity. So they ended up going face to face in the NBA playoffs around the summer. So WCW figured why not capitalize on their immense popularity by bringing those two NBA players inside a wrestling ring. So in reality, they actually made a main event in a tag match with Karl Malone had DDP, Dennis Rodman had Hogan, since they were both part of the NWO. Um, but looking at the undercard beside that, it just looked very disappointing. I mean, I remember watching this, and I'm reading some of these reviews to kind of get a clear memory as to how this card unfolded and some of the matches that happened that night, and it wasn't really well received. And I tried to figure out what I could do to maybe make adjustments in order to improve the pay-per-view quality, or at least get enough viewers invested in ordering the pay-per-view. Basically, I really think that this could have been more of a pay-per-view. I mean, especially since this is WCW's biggest pay-per-view, and basically their answer to what WWE had with SummerSlam. I booked 9 matches on the card, so I really want to try to go all out and produce the best card possible, and take it from there. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to kick off my Bash at the Beach 98 fantasy card by opening it with a TV title defense. So we have the champion Chris Benoit to defend the belt against Chris Jericho. Really want to start off this pay-per-view with a strong style, technically sound match. And you have Chris Jericho, it's Chris Benoit. These two mat-based, technically sounded wrestlers, very similar styles, and real life friends. So I can't really imagine them having a really bad match. So I'm pretty sure these two guys can really tear the house down. And Chris Jericho just came off of that Cruiserweight title reign, and now he's moving up the ladder, and try to really give Chris Benoit some competition, so to speak. So like I said, a match that I really want to start off, with a bang, and try to get the crowd rolling, and plenty of time, and Chris Jericho will end up coming out on top as the new television champion. Then we have the second match, Konnan taking on Juventud Guerrera. Not really much build up, but just to present these two Mexican wrestlers, and try to get Konnan and Juvi on the card, and try to showcase them. Um, yeah, so Juventud, just got unmasked, but he's racking up a lot of wins on television despite being unmasked, and Konnan, still part of the NWO, and he's trying to prove himself that he is the number one Mexican wrestler alive, and just being full of himself, and like pretty arrogant is what I'm trying to say. And Juventud, high flying wrestler, and like I said, just not really much build up, but to really kind of showcase these two guys, and they could actually have a pretty good match. They've had several encounters in the past, so it wouldn't be a long match because it's so early on in the card. But Conan's going to go over Juventud in this match. Trying to build up Konnan for a potential mid card title shot down the road. So there you go. That's pretty much the second match. So there you go with that. My third match on the card would be an open challenge for the Dean Malenko's Cruiserweight Championship. Um, yeah, so this could be some kind of a little gimmick for Dean Malenko, something for him to do, especially now that he's got Chris Jericho out of the way. And ever since then, Dean Malenko's starting up these series of open challenges, much like what you see with John Cena with the United States title challenge, and requesting a certain wrestler to come out of the curtain, just any random wrestler, and that uh, that's willing to step up against whoever the champion is, and and they go at it, and um, just really try to showcase the cruiserweight division, obviously, and just basically Dean Malenko really showcasing his pride and honor when it comes to professional wrestling, and um, you know, talking about his family legacy with Boris Malenko, and trying to pay his respect to his father, and especially Dean Malenko himself, just being a strong fighting champion, basically. Yeah, so Dean Malenko's conducting these open challenges to any random cruiserweight wrestler that they have on the roster, and I'm pretty sure the cruiserweight division was so deep at this time, so they could come up with like any wrestler that they have in particular. So, Dean Malenko, would come out of those cruiserweight title defenses on, Nitro, Thunder, Saturday Night if need be. Um, and Dean Malenko was successfully retained in those series of open challenges. And there also be some occasions where he would be, some of his cruiserweight open challenges would end in like maybe a time limit draw or some sort of double count out. And if that does happen, they would do the rematch, and Dean Malenko would successfully get a clean victory. Um, and so far so good for Dean Malenko, and really try to present him, especially given carrying some of that momentum that he had from his program with Jericho. So really want to keep the heat on Dean Malenko, and maintain that momentum going. And then we get to Bash at the Beach. So Dean Malenko would continue to conduct these cruiserweight title challenges, and Malenko, cuts a short promo, sweet, short, sweet to the point, since Dean Malenko isn't known for his mic ability and stuff. But yeah, so Dean Malenko, requests a certain wrestler to come out of the curtain, whoever it's going to be. Everything's silent for a bit, so Dean Malenko's waiting. The announcers are, wondering who could it be. Rey Mysterio's theme song hits, so hopefully to a big crowd pop and standing ovation. Rey Mysterio comes back. Announcers put it over that we haven't seen this guy in many months. Since he had to take time off to recover from his knee injury. Yeah, so Rey Mysterio comes back, and he and Malenko go at it for a couple minutes. Yeah, it should be a really good match. Malenko and Mysterio have fought each other even prior, so should be off the chain. And despite Dean Malenko's efforts, Rey Mysterio will find a way to use a end up using a roll up to win the match and the cruiserweight championship. So so it's gonna be kind of like a winning upset in a way, like a more like an underdog victory where Rey Mysterio like wins the match but barely. So it's gonna be kind of like some kind of last minute desperation. So it looks like Dean Malenko has Rey Mysterio beat, and then Rey Mysterio like counters into some kind of roll up that will allow him the victory and to walk off as the new cruiserweight champion. So yeah, so like I said, Rey Mysterio comes back, and you want to have him come back hot, and he's obviously going to walk off as your new cruiserweight champion. So there you have it. That tag team title defense. So we have the champions, the Faces of Fear, to defend their belts against Harlem Heat. But yeah, so if you watched my previous video where I booked the Great American Bash, Harlem Heat won a number one contendership bout against the Public Enemy. And, everything's going well for Harlem Heat. everything's going fine. There's um, but even weeks going into this pay per view, Booker and Stevie Ray are um, having their kind of on and off dissension, but but for the most part, they're doing really well. They've been on a roll, winning these tag matches. Even if there are some cases where Stevie Ray feels like he should be the guy, contributing to his team's victory, like having to be the legal man all the time to win a certain tag match, but it's always Booker that's finishing off the matches. So it's much to Stevie's chagrin. I think that's how you pronounced it. But for the most part, things have been um, slowly going well for Harlem Heat, and the Faces of Fear continue to be this dominant powerhouse tag team, and very intimidating. With Ming and Barbarian, and Jimmy Hart's still the manager. Um, yeah, so they have a match. It won't be that long. Um, and then eventually, at some point, Booker attempts to go for a hot tag, but Stevie Ray at the last moment just drops off the apron, and Booker's like, "What are you doing, man? Like, come on, tag me!" And Stevie Ray's just walking off, and like somewhat of in a disappointing face. That he wants to be, the it guy to, be the legal man, but Stevie Ray just had too, Stevie Ray gave Booker T too many chances at a tag, but most time Booker T is always, more or less of the time, a little stubborn. Booker T is mostly the legal man. Stevie Ray's like on the sideline stuff. So Stevie Ray's just had enough of this, and Booker T has to fight all by himself, 2-on-1. So it's basically a handicap match, and Booker tries to fight as hard as he can. And despite his efforts, it's not enough for Ming to lock in that tongue and death grip, and basically gets the 1, 2, 3. So yeah, the Faces of Fear will go over as still your tag team champions. Booker T's just knocked out, and Stevie Ray comes back and looks like he's gonna help out Booker, and he carries him up, and then um, it seems like like Stevie Ray's gonna apologize, but at the last minute, Stevie Ray just kicks him in the gut, and then does that slapjack, which was basically kind of like a sort of like a pedigree, but he like lifts him up and he just slams him down. Um, yeah, so Stevie Ray lays that slapjack on Booker T, and just signifying a heel turn, and crowd boos. Announcers can't believe what they just saw with Stevie turning on his brother, and basically you cut to commercial break afterwards. Even though technically pay-per-views don't have commercial breaks, but they do like have WCW cut, a WCW related promo would come up after that, like maybe advertising their next pay-per-view event or something. Um, but yeah, so basically that's how you end that little segment, and even the match itself. So yeah, the Faces of Fear are still your tag team champions. Then we have is the Ravens rules for the United States Championship. Raven taking on Perry Saturn. Yeah, so Perry Saturn is actually kicked out of the flock. There has been a falling out between those two, going back a couple months prior at around Slamboree time, where Perry Saturn fought against Goldberg, but Saturn insists on having the flock, keeping them off, keeping them away from the ring, keeping just saying that with Saturn that he could take Goldberg by himself, not letting other people help him fight his battles. And despite Perry Saturn just getting so close to the point where he could potentially beat Goldberg, but eventually Goldberg makes a comeback and basically comes out on top. So the flock is looking pretty disappointed at Perry Saturn. And Raven does have something to say about that, and he's the champion, so everyone in the flock should bow down to him, because he's the only that he is the center of attention, that he is the dominant force of the team. And Perry Saturn is just kind of sick and tired of just Raven's antics and his mannerisms, and um, that sort of thing. And you get to the Great American Bash. So, Raven's the champion and uses that U.S. Championship belt as an excuse for why he should be fighting against the world champion Sting. So you have, yeah, so it's only the world title belt being up for grabs. And, eventually, like, all the flock members try to find a way to get through DDP since he was like the guest enforcer, and he's doing all he can to prevent the flock from interfering in that match. But regardless, the flock just jumps up anyway since it's Raven's rules. So, I mean, come on. I mean, it's no DQ, so you can't be disqualified. But DDP eventually does help Sting and try to fend off the flock. Um, and then Raven does like tries to go for like a even flow DDT and tries to go for a cover, but there's just a lot of craziness going on, and Sting kicking out the even flow. Um, and then Sting makes a comeback, locks in the Scorpion Deathlock. Perry Saturn comes out, so so everyone in the flock had already attacked, but Perry Saturn isn't present in at the front row crowd where you normally see the flock sitting at ringside. But you don't see Perry Saturn there until he comes out from the curtain to the aisle, and basically he's staying on the apron. Raven's screaming since he's getting locked in the Scorpion Deathlock, and Saturn just steps down from the apron and watching him. Raven suffer at the hands of Sting, and Saturn just having this smirk on his face. So Sting would retain the world title in that main event. Um, so yeah, so Raven's already pissed off, and Saturn, you know, um, he's like I said, he's just very sick of Raven, and that he doesn't want to have anything to do with him, and trying to stand up for himself and doing things that Raven that he doesn't really care about. Um, the flock and Perry Saturn himself, but and basically the flock ended up attacking Perry Saturn, and Raven just being the master manipulator that he is, ends up attacking Perry Saturn and kicking him off the flock. So there's some heated battle going on between the two, and then it kind of culminates in this U.S. title bout built for Bash at the Beach. Um, yeah, so they did this match at Bash at the Beach in the actual pay per view, and I think it was like an opening bout. But I would actually have this go on a little longer than it is. I know they had a couple series of matches. I want this match to be kind of about as similarly booked to their Fall Brawl '98 match with the Saturn Raven just going hard on with objects, and a pretty well fast paced match, and a lot of overbooking, with the flock coming out and creating all the suspense that Raven could potentially beat Saturn, and Perry Saturn would kick out of every near fall, that every time Raven goes for a pinfall. Um, so I mean, it could be a really hard fought bout, and eventually so at the end of the match, Perry Saturn hits the Death Valley driver. One, two, three, and Saturn is your new United States champion. Very bloody match. Probably be very rare for WCW to do that, since they don't normally have blood. But if they could maybe have them bleed, even if it's just uh, a slight blade job is what I'm trying to say. But if not, just try to make it out to be this hard fought bout, and Saturn is just all dazed and wobbly, and he's holding that U.S. title belt, and he's celebrating after the match. So yeah, so we have Perry Saturn walk off as a new United States champion. Raven is just distraught, and there that's pretty much how I would book that match. So assuming that Raven Saturn would come off to a very hard fought, energetic match that would have exhausted the crowd. We're gonna kind of quiet down the audience. This would be, Goldberg taking on Curt Hennig, which would be kind of like a, typical Goldberg squash match. Goldberg's continuing to fight the NWO, and Curt Hennig's still part of the NWO. So they did this match also at Bash at the Beach '98, which was for the world title. It was a very short match, but this, try to feature Goldberg on the card, and basically have, basically the same as what we saw. Goldberg uh, demolishing Curt Hennig, spear, jackhammer, just to win the match. And post match celebration, this did not happen in the actual event, but I'm just going to kind of add this to kind of set up another feud for Goldberg. The NWO are going to come out and try to take down Goldberg, just have this odds on, the strength in numbers, just trying to overwhelm Goldberg as best as they can. Eventually, Goldberg will try his best to, plow through at least some of the NWOB team members. And then, outsiders, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash will come out and try to decimate Goldberg. And then, Giant comes out and, cleans house like he's been doing, with the NWO since he's been, going at it for, 2 years or so. And, Giant scares off the NWO. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash stare at, Giant, and, they're at ringside, and, um, Goldberg gets up, and, he and the Giant eventually have this sort of stare down afterwards. So it's like, Goldberg doesn't want Giant's help, and that's sort of like that gesture, like Giant tried to help Goldberg, but Goldberg's like, back off, um, even though, despite the fact that those two wrestlers represent WCW, so try to add a little layer, a little dimension to that, Goldberg and Giant, because they're like these two young powerhouse wrestlers, but there's just, even though they're both fighting for the same company, it's like, like Goldberg just doesn't want anyone's help because he's a guy, he's a lone wolf, and he's basically been on a tear these past several months. Um, so there is definitely going to be a sign of things to come for Goldberg and Giant as they um, as they continue to feud with the NWO. Whether they're going to be teaming up or not, that's kind of up to them. So they're this would be kind of a twist for Goldberg, and the direction he's going, and whether he could be just as a good team player as he is as a single star is kind of the question. So that's how I would end it there. And then we get to another tag match, which would consist of two NBA players on opposing teams. So I'm gonna have Lex Luger and Karl Malone to take on Scott Steiner and Dennis Rodman. I wouldn't necessarily built the pay per view around those two guys as the main event, but I would definitely don't mind having to feature them if I had to. But just kind of like an undercard match, but not necessarily too long of a match. You could also bring up, Lex Luger's beef with Dennis Rodman and how they were on opposing teams the previous Bash at the Beach, and how Dennis Rodman, can mention about, how he and Hogan screwed up the previous year, but this time Dennis Rodman's back, and he's back better than ever, and he's looked at all the tapes of behind Lex Luger's matches, and trying to hopefully correct his mistakes and figure out what went wrong, and hopefully Dennis Rodman would try to up one Lex Luger this time around. And because Rodman and Scott Steiner is a part of the NWO by this point, and Dennis Rodman is just coming in by the summer, and he's still in the NWO as well. So Lex Luger figured, why not trying to fight fire with fire? If the NWO had Dennis Rodman, an NBA player, why not bring another NBA player in the mix? And voila, Karl Malone comes in into play, and you know that kind of creates our tag team match set for Bash at the Beach. And pretty short, harmless match, like I said, and continuation of the Luger Scott Steiner feud. Um, so we're gonna expect Scott Steiner to take the to win for his him and Rodman, and you know Steiner and Rodman would resort to dirty tactics like like pretty much anyone in the NWO would do, and uh, they will eventually try to Scott Steiner would um, lock in the Steiner recliner on an unconscious Lex Luger. So I think what you could do is maybe have Dennis Rodman maybe slip an item for Scott Steiner to carry, and Scott Steiner would just nail the weapon onto Lex Luger, rendering him unconscious. Carl Malone and Dennis Rodman could go at it at ringside and just top, 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 and just beat the try to go all out and just have like this all out brawl at ringside, and Scott Steiner would lock in the Steiner recliner on Luger, and Luger would pass out. So Steiner and Rodman would win the match, and this would be kind of a way to really sell the Steiner recliner as a really dangerous submission hold, and as much as the referee as the announcers would put over. Um, and so, this would be kind of a way to write off Lex Luger for a couple months. Kind of like a kayfabe worked injury angle. Just, give Luger some time off. And, I haven't really had anything for Lex Luger to do exactly. So to really pass that heat over to Scott Steiner and, really try to cement him as this uh, top echelon heel in the making. So that's how I would book the match, and like I said, Steiner and Robin would come off as the victors of this special attraction tag match. And then we get to the last two matches on Bash at the Beach. One of them will be Bret Hart taking on Hulk Hogan. Yes, this is going to be definitely a anticipated match that's been the talk of the town for several years, and this kind of stems back from Starrcade '97 when Bret Hart made his first WCW pay-per-view appearance, and was involved in that Sting Hogan match, and Bret Hart came off as the special referee at the last minute, and basically his involvement ended up costing Hogan the world title, and allowing Sting the championship belt, and um, and everyone remembers that fast count that Nick Patrick supposedly did, um, and Bret Hart just taking over and um, being the reason why Hogan isn't the champion anymore. So Hogan's still holding a grudge on Bret Hart, and he's really just really willing to go after Bret for months and months and months. But Hogan's had other plans in mind. Same goes for Bret Hart. He's also wanting to get his hands on Hogan, but he's also had other things on his mind as well. And basically it's been up and down for the past several months, and finally they get to have their one-on-one bout in the summer, and this kind of really stems into a big-time match. Yes, so definitely a match that WCW should have done. I know WCW actually did book a match on Nitro when they gave it away for free, but it ended in some kind of no finish because they kind of used this sort of as a plot device so they could set up Bret Hart versus Sting. Um, but we're not gonna have that in this universe, so we're gonna definitely do a proper Bret Hart Hogan match at Bash at the Beach, and and I was gonna say something else, but Bret Hart's gonna go over Hulk Hogan in this match. Um, Hogan, just trying to pound away on Bret Hart trying to um, come back on the offense, and you're gonna probably have a few NWO interferences here and there, but that's not gonna stop Bret from coming up short. So, Hogan's gonna do his best. Bret Hart, hopefully, these two guys could really try to put off hopefully a very memorable match, not a clusterfuck. So a very anticipated match. So it's really important to really put off, the best um, memorable match that they can. And like I said, Bret Hart will go over Hollywood Hulk Hogan, and basically win the match. So there you go with that. And then we get to our main event, which will consist of Sting, the champion, defending the belt against Diamond Dallas Page. So basically, DDP comes back at the Great American Bash, um, you know, as the special guest enforcer in the Raven Sting main event. And, and basically, DDP coming back after, months of getting annihilated by Raven and his flock members. So DDP, comes back as the enforcer to kind of, tie up loose ends and a lot, and Sting would come out on top. So so DDP mentioned brings up in the promo about how uh, it's been over a year or so since the NWO has attacked us, and DDP feels that he owes Sting for the amount of times that he saved him from the NWO, and he'll mention that one time where Sting came from the rafters and brought DDP up, and going up from it was that June 9th, 1997 edition. It was where like there was like this WCW NWO brawl going on, and Sting actually uh, pulled DDP up from the ground and all the way up to the rafters. Um, I don't know if I might show a clip down in the description box if need be, but I think you might get where I'm coming from here. Um, but yeah, so there, DDP, feels that he owes Sting, the multiple times that he saved his ass, and and DDP ended up saving Sting's ass, returning the favor, for getting involved in the whole Flock feud, and it feels that Sting should defend the belt against DDP since he helped, since they both helped each other out when it comes to um, as far as fending off uh, villainous factions are concerned. So, but Sting, tells DDP, he's like, no, 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 you're not gonna get it right, that easily. So if you want that world title shot, DDP, you gotta face my best friend, Lex Luger. So this kind of sets up this number one contenders match on Nitro, and since Luger's feuding with Scott Steiner at this time, Steiner and Dennis Rodman would interfere in that match and uh, cost Lex Luger the match, and DDP would end up winning and becoming the number one contender against Sting and his world championship. So there, that kind of sets up your main event. And this should be a really great match. They've had a couple encounters, and they could really work well. I'm hoping this would be just as good as what would turn out, what would end up like their April 26, 1999 match, and it was a really great match. I mean, if you haven't checked on WWE Network, maybe check it out on that, or maybe scroll around Daily Motion or something. But it was a very tremendous match, and if you give them the same length as their TV match, I think it should be a really this should really kind of amp up the buy rates and get viewers uh, getting their money's worth. So the finish would be DDP trying to go for the diamond cutter, and then Sting at the last moment just counters it into like a scorpion death drop. 1, 2, 3. Sting walks out, still your world heavyweight champion, and basically ends with the handshake between Sting and DDP, showing mutual sportsmanship like, and basically that's how I would end the end the match, and as well as the pay per view in general. So that's pretty much your main event for Bash of the Beach: Sting, DDP, and Sting, coming out on top as your world heavyweight champion. So we concluded Bash at the Beach. So stick around as we continue to book WCW 1998 with the August pay per view Road Wild. So stick around for that as always. And till next time, this is the Gold Standard 0924 signing out.